as Gladys mentioned, my name is Adriana Schneider. I'm a senior engagement engineer with Imagineit. My background is in architectural engineering, went to school for it, did an industry, moved over to Autodesk when Revit MEP and Revit Structure first came out, and moved over to the channel about 20 years ago to help with support and training of the different solutions. I moved into this role about 8 years ago to really help our clients optimize their technology adoption and help them with their implementation.
Cool. And Joe Atkins here, as the director for what we call the Building Lifecycle Solutions team. I get to work with everybody that does anything with buildings, whether it's design, engineering, construction. We've got a facilities management team. All of the fun there. Similar to Adriana, I started off thinking, yeah, I'm going to be an architect. Got lured away by technology. I came to the company 22 almost years ago now, and sitting where we are here. Prior to this life, worked as CAD manager, BIM manager, IT manager, the guy with every hat that you could imagine, short of stamping drawings. And really what we're intending to do here is take the knowledge that we've got from professional experience from our time working in the consulting and training side of the business to be able to help out with what can we do for those incremental changes and what things are going on. So as we're getting into the meat of the presentation here, we're going to be passing the baton back and forth. But as we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera, save bandwidth, all that sort of fun stuff. And then we'll turn back on when we get to the end of the session to be able to work through the Q&A and answer questions that are coming around. As we are getting into this, one of the things I want to start by talking about is where we've been. Because this presentation that we're having here on BIM management isn't the first one that we've done. We've had a series of other webcasts on BIM management that have covered a myriad of other topics. Some of them while we were in a global pandemic and others when we were not in a global pandemic. So there's certainly been a mix. And if you need to, we've got a link that'll be pointed out a little bit later on in a future slide here in a moment that you can go to our Imagineit website and get into all of the past webcasts. You can find some of these things, but we talked about what are the differences between strategic and operational, strategic and tactical types of activities that you might do as a BIM manager, and how do we want to and why do we want to define it in some of those different ways? How do you identify and define what you've got for a BIM strategy and different ways to enact it? The differences between managing people and managing software. There's going to be so many different places where managing software is going to be just a ton easier than trying to manage people. People are messy, and we've got to work through that. Defining the strategies, checking and validating those strategies against your corporate and personal goals and objectives, positioning yourself to succeed. Sometimes you'll be able to get the assistance from others around you to be able to get positioned to succeed, but you've got to take some personal initiative on that as well. All those types of things are items that we've covered in past conversations about BIM management strategies for it. So that's going to be a good resource to look back onto and understand. But if we've done all these things in the past, understanding strategy, tactics, people, technology, and things like that, where are we going to next? And really what we're talking about in this particular session is, well, you have already had it before, there's micro adjustments that we can make as we're going through to add up to big changes because we're crazy busy. I don't know if you had I'm assuming, we'll go through that. We all know what assumes can do, but I'm assuming that you are in a similar position to Adriana and myself, where there's just a lot to be done, whether you're working from home, working from the office, working in a hybrid mode, doesn't matter what you've got going on, but everybody is really busy. I'm not having any conversations within the last, quarter or more, half a year, for a period of time, where the person I'm talking to isn't in some sort of a hiring or searching mode for bringing people into their company. Everybody's out there looking for someone, and because everybody's looking, that means everybody's a little bit short-staffed, and it's crazy. There's no time to get things done. And if there's no time to get things done, how do we make progress? And really what it comes down to is identifying those smaller incremental changes that we can make that do add up over time. And it's sometimes scary how much they can add up to over time. The next slide I'll have here in a moment is that pulled it off of YouTube. So giving credit where credit is due. It's not my video, but it's something I've found. It was stumbled on through a social media feed a while back. There's the link for it. Copy it down, whatever, but search for it. The idea behind it, though, is it really, really helps emphasize the power of incremental change. Compound interest kind of falls into that same strategy as well. But the overall idea behind this is, I'm going to go ahead and hit play here. It's only, about a minute long, so not too long. I'll talk over a little bit of it, but you're going to be looking at a room and see if you could spot the little things that change in here. And the idea with this is we're trying to identify the change. You can say, aha, see, I saw that thing, it changed. And so you can be, yes, I saw the change. Sometimes though, these changes can be unnoticed. They're out there, and it's just a small change. Unless you're really looking for it, you might not actually see it. So did you notice that a lot of things changed? If we're going through little incremental changes and stacking it up over time, the before and after picture that we have here can be dramatically different. And if you're in the middle of it, you might not notice just how much change you've enacted over time, but you'll see it when you look back to say, holy cow, that's where we were 3, 6, 12, 24 months ago. Those little things can add up dramatically. And that's where we're going to be focusing here. We're going to be focusing on what we can do to make those changes that when you look back, you'll say, wow, we're in a much better place. So I'm going to turn it over to Adriana for the first one that we'll be talking about here.
Sure, thanks. So really the most successful, you can go to the next slide, unless I missed it. The most successful implementations or any optimizations that we see are those that have a plan created and those that execute that plan. So talking about where you are today and the challenges that you may be going through, the determination is, where do you actually want to be? Knowing where you want to be from where you are today allows you to dictate a plan, whether it be workflow based, whether it be just whatever changes need to be made. This is what needs to happen to get there. Having that tangible plan makes it easier to consume and to achieve any changes, those specifically that Joe was talking about, those small incremental changes that ultimately can make a really large impact on your organization.
Yeah, and really with that plan is break it down. Break it down as small as you can, just so you can get to those itty bitty pieces. So part one, get the plan. It's a great quote, get it going. So part two of this, if we're looking at that and saying, okay, I've got a plan, but what can I put into that plan? What are the little micro adjustments that we have through there? One of them can be as simple as simplifying the add-ins. If you think about, and this doesn't have to be Revit specifically, it can be Revit, AutoCAD, any software, even maybe not add-ins to Revit or AutoCAD specifically, but additional pieces of software that you have that you're managing and supporting. If you're in BIM management, how many different tools does your company use for conceptual design? And it may be that you can't adjust it because the way the company works, you have all of those and that's just the way it is. Okay, but let's think about it. Let's plan for it, because if you can simplify what you have, then it allows you to, with the limited time you have, make a greater impact because you don't have to touch as many things. Now, as I was going through this and was reading up on I was searching for images to pull into the wonderful world of PowerPoint. I stumbled onto this one. And this is actually a screen cap from a blog post that I made many, many years ago. That was a blog post about comparing and contrasting what's the difference between Revit architecture, Revit structure, and Revit MEP. What tools do we have on the ribbons that are different? And this is going back far enough when there was a separate Revit architecture, Revit structure, and Revit MEP program. And I went through each of the different tabs through here and just grabbed it all. And it registered with me because when I was looking for some different things, it was really trying to find what's an example of somebody has out there that somebody might have documented of a Revit ribbon that is absolutely out of control with too many add-ins. I got to this one first, so that's where I went. But it was a bit of a simpler time back then. There wasn't as much to look at, as much to work through. And now if we compare that once upon a time, this is going to be going back 10, 12 years. I don't know how far back it was. It was back a ways. Go from just the features that were there to right now. This is a screen cap of my add-ins. So of Revit, do you have an issue where you have to hit this little double arrow on a regular basis to get all to the different tabs and things that you've got set up in Revit or AutoCAD or wherever you happen to be? If yes, then you might be at a spot where we need to reduce the number of add-ins that you've got. The screen cap below with the black background, I just took from all of the additional tabs from add-ins that I have and peeled off all of the panels and just arranged them on my desktop just so we could see that. There's a fair amount of stuff there, and I don't think I've got a very complex setup at all. But as I was doing it, I was also noticing that there's tools in here that I don't know if I have ever clicked on the button. So there, if I've never clicked on the button, and I can do a quick survey around the company and say, hey, do you use this? Do you use this? Do you use this? And maybe nobody has used it. Let's get rid of it so I'm not distracted by it. As you're looking at the different tools, can you find places where there might be overlap between different add-ins that you have? And let's go ahead and simplify there. So it's a pretty simple thing. And depending on the size of your company, even though it's pretty simple, it might take a little bit of time depending on the depth and breadth of the survey that you need to do. One of the things that can help out with that is, hey, there's going to be some amount of plugs for stuff in here, which hopefully that's understood as you're coming into any webcast. But imagine it's got a piece of software. We've had this, been developing it for a long time, called Clarity. And one of the features of the Clarity software is the ability to collect information from all of your end user workstations about what versions of Revit are installed and what add-ins are installed on all of your different workstations. So if you've got Clarity and you've never used this, well, maybe it's something you can take advantage of to be able to see what add-ins are installed on which computers throughout your organization. If you don't have and you've been thinking about Clarity, well, don't forget that we've got some of these features too. We don't often cover stuff like this in a webcast or a demo because there's other more splashy types of things that we go through, but there's some really cool just core features that can help out from a CAD BIM management standpoint. You might be the only one that it really hits on a heavy basis, but it's good stuff there. So step one of some of these things is take a look at your add-ons, and then there's bottlenecks. Adriana?
So in the simplest definition, a bottleneck is some kind of work stage. And in that work stage, it gets more requests than it can actually process in its maximum throughput capacity. So what does this do? Well, it causes interruption, or as I always say in AEC industry, disruption across the entire production process. Now, bottlenecks don't completely go away, but they move. And in a specific bottleneck can disappear, but you'll always have some kind of bottleneck. Let's move them so we have less disruption within your processes. That could be something as simple as adding a family content management software tool. It could be something as easy as switching out your add-ins and simplifying and reducing the amount of time people take to actually find things for them to do. having a bottleneck is something that's going to be consistent, but reducing them within the process within your environment can certainly decrease the amount of disruption that you may have. You know, there's so many different ones. I mean, just something as simple as putting schedules in Revit could be a bottleneck that, you know, then moves over to somewhere else, creating detail libraries, many of the things that we're going to be talking about today. But it's something that people don't realize can be very effective. Similarly to our conversation earlier about making a plan. Just having that plan, honestly, we have found has made it so much easier to make changes because you have something tangible that people can really view.
Cool. So if we've got bottlenecks and things that are sitting out there, one of the bottlenecks can be, you know, maybe not quite super evidently, but it can be the idea of what are you doing with your content? Now, as we're talking about content and checking the content, evaluating, maintaining, and all sorts of things there's many different ways that this can appear. Now, this is not going to turn into a big thing of what constitutes good Revit content and what is not good content. There's, you know, maybe if that's something that you think we should do as a future webcast and just reiterate some of those things, you know, best practices for that, let us know. Give some feedback, maybe a comment in the chat here or something along those lines. But the screen caps here, there was a project that we did for a customer, and we'll just say recently, keeping everybody anonymous, where we did a health check for their Revit file to identify what's good, what can be improved, things like that. The screen caps here were of pieces of content inside that file that we were reviewing. And generally speaking, if you have a sprinkler symbol that is as detailed as the one we're looking at here, the first two pictures on the left, that's probably more detail than you really need. It'll render really pretty, but it's probably more detail than you need. So doing some sanity checks. When you're pulling family content from a manufacturer, does that manufacturer have their logo emblazoned on, in this case, the water tank or whatever it happens to be, in 3D text or other types of things? Again, it helps them branding, and I understand why a manufacturer will want to do it, but there's always going to be those instances where things are more detailed than they need to be. And as you're reviewing things, taking a look at that, helping to communicate to your team more broadly of what's good, what's not good, let's review things, whatever. But there's also places where it might be a little more subtle. The brown item that's in there, I've got one of the faces on that thing highlighted just so you can see a little bit of the depth of what's going on. It's part of what was a pump. And this was part of the stand related to a pump. And initially it looked great. But then as we were digging into the file, noticed that, you know, this part of the stand of the pump was hollow inside. And there's no practical reason for this thing to have been hollow. It doesn't really add to the rendering needs for what we were looking at. It didn't add to anything that we'd be sectioning through. It was just, that's how it was manufactured, probably, you know, save on materials, but it's not needed. So when we're looking at the families, there's a human aspect of this to be keeping track of what we're doing. Sometimes you might not know that a particular family is not modeled the way it should be, but you can tell visually that it's just too detailed. You know, from a modeling standpoint, you want to do an extrusion more than you want to do a revolve, just because the revolve is a little bit heavier, we'll say, as a family than an extrusion is. So going back to that same sprinkler head, if you did the piping and the circular pieces above the spout, we'll call it, of the sprinkler. I know I'm butchering the words here. But if we're doing that, if you decide, yes, I'll do this as a revolve because I can draw the profile and zoop, it's good. It does do it, and you might not notice any graphical difference, but it's heavier from a family side. And some of those things you just have to dig into to be able to see, and you might not have the time for that. So if we're talking about these micros, you're going to miss things on those cases unless you're able to have a deeper pocket of time to dig in. But there's got to be some tools out there to help out with evaluating content instead of just looking at them all the time manually. So if you got this webcast invitation, my assumption may not always be good, but my assumption that I'll have is that you're probably a customer of ours. If not, you should be. But that being said, if you're a customer of Imagine It, you get your software through us, then you get automatically free our utilities for Revit. And that's the toolbar on the left-hand side. I split it into two because it's just too long. There's all sorts of different tools in there, one of which is a button for checking for DWGs. So you can just click in a family file, click in a project file, and say, is there any DWG data inside my family? That's a quick, easy thing to do, just to be able to, this is weird, click, is there any? Great, let's move on. So free stuff, it's an easy check. Anybody can do it and identify what the DWG is, if there is any, where it is, and what you need to do from it from that point forward. There's also the ability, quick and easy, it takes a little bit of time, but maybe set it running before you leave at the end of the day or at lunch or something, but the ability to export all of the families in a project to a folder. Take that folder, sort it by file size, and just take a look at the largest families. Are all of your families below 600K? Do you have any 6 megabyte families? What's in those families? Are they unnecessarily complex? That can be quick. I mean, again, depending on the size of the project, the amount of time it takes to export to that library can take a while. Every once in a while, you might have to hit a button of saying, yeah, remove constraints as we're exporting to the library, but it's, you can run it on the side, run it in the background, and then do some quick checks. It doesn't take too long, and you can get an idea of what's good and what's maybe not so good that's running inside your families. Some free tools that are out there, free to you, grab them, use them. And what else do we have? Adriana? If you're talking, you're muted.
Well, that was fun. So, you know, there are a lot of tools within the AEC collections that no matter what industry you're in, you have the ability to use. We have your typical Revit, which can be utilized throughout the entire life cycle of a project. On top of that, you already have Dynamo within the package. From an initial stage, whether it is conceptual design or bringing in point clouds, whether it's getting GIS data to really show, you know, proposals of what that space is going to look like, utilizing InfraWorks. Throughout the process, you can be rendering within Revit or utilizing tools like 3ds Max, and then clash detections with Navisworks, all sitting on Autodesk Docs, all products that you have within the AEC collection. If we're from a structural perspective, you have the structural analysis for Revit or robot structural analysis. There's a steel connections. You can even be working with advanced steel depending on what the processes are all about that you perform. Early on, again, same concept with recap or collision detection with Navisworks may be important with your MEP firm. You have the tools to be able to utilize all of those. And then lastly, from an MEP perspective, you know, again, some of these are very similar, right? Utilizing Revit and Dynamo together, maybe tracking some of this information with Insight, utilizing Recap for point cloud integration or InfraWorks for utilities, bringing it in with Fabrication CAD MEP for any fabrication that needs to be done, or collision detection. I know can be very important, especially for mechanical engineers, for the mechanical rooms themselves, and many other aspects of the building design. Again, all of it sitting on Docs. These are all tools that are more than just Revit that you have from your AEC collection. There are many different places for you to learn about them. dynamobim.org is a wonderful it's an organization really, but a group of people who have spent lots of time developing and optimizing the use of Dynamo. There's tools out there to learn all of these different products, including working with Imaginet, but that's really neither here nor there. Even the help desk can help in certain ways. So there are tools out there that can optimize your technology adoption. Just implementing some Dynamo scripts can make your teams more efficient. And getting to know how to use that is very, very valuable since you already own it.
Let me stab a question at you, Adriana. So if put you on the spot, sorry, but aside from Dynamo, if we, let's say one for architecture, one for structure, one for MEP, if somebody was just using Revit inside the AEC collection and not knowing what they do, just generically they're an architect, structural engineer, MEP engineer, what's something that you might suggest that they consider looking at if they have no idea where to go to even start considering?
So outside of Dynamo, from an architectural perspective, I definitely would look into both InfraWorks as well as Format. I think those are two very valuable tools that architects can use. InfraWorks from not only a proposal perspective, but also communication between architecture and civil industries. And then Format being a tool that was brought in by engineers who developed SketchUp. There's a lot of similarities between the two tools. Sometimes it is accepted with open arms, sometimes it's not, and that's okay. But exploring the tool, I think, can be very valuable. From a structural engineering perspective, just the simple structural analysis tools within Revit, I think, are wonderful. Again, depending on what it is that you guys are doing, the steel connections, if you simply want to detail a little bit more or enhance the details you've already created, I think both of those tools can certainly be beneficial from an immediate perspective. And then for MEP, again, it really depends. I think Navisworks is probably my low-hanging fruit. Collision coordination with the different trades, because you have that available to you, and more often than not, those are the changes that need to be made or can be made. I think Navisworks is definitely a tool that I see more and more, especially mechanical engineers, using on a regular basis.
Cool, thank you.
Sure.
So yeah, from there, then if we got content, we've got all the different software that's out there. And I was harping on the quality of your content and managing and maintaining that over time. I'm also going to harp on the quality of your models. Healthy Revit files allow for you and your team to be just that much more productive. And there's going to be a ton of different ways that we can go about gathering information about what's happening inside your models. I mean, the very least, you can just go and check and say, how many warnings do I have? And start from there. But there's going to be things that you might want to be looking at or tracking over time that are different. So again, I'll go back to the Imaginet Clarity piece. We've got tools specifically in there to check over 70 different aspects of your Revit file for things. And based off of thresholds that you set, you can say, is this good? Is it in danger territory, or is it bad? Green, yellow, red markings through here. Be able to track how things are changing over time to compare different values to each other. The recent version of Clarity, which just shipped, and by the way, we have a What's New in Clarity 2022.1 webcast, I believe, tomorrow happening. So that might be a fun one to get into. But we just added in the ability to compare the metrics that you are tracking with other people that are also using Clarity, and to identify, you know, if you say that 10 warnings is okay, does that align itself with what other people are thinking? Or where do you fit within the spectrum of people that are collaborating in this Clarity environment? That's going to be the world of, you know, paid tools when we get into the health checks, but there's a lot of good things that are out there to be able to constantly work and monitor your files. Now, beyond that, from a Clarity side, we had a webcast just a couple of weeks ago, I believe, that was using ID8 BIM Link to run a health check on your Revit files. It was led by Eugene O'Day, one of the team managers we've got for the Building Solutions consulting team. That I'd mentioned way back at the beginning of this webcast that we were going to have a place that had some links in it. Unfortunately, through GoToMeeting, you can't click on that link and go to it, but it's pretty easy. You know, resources.imaginative.com/videos-webcasts, or just go to the website and under the resources drop-down layout area, you've got all access to all these different types of things. The specific one was this thing of using BIMLink to run a health check on your Revit models. It's different types of tools, different types of ways to get there. So there was this clarity thing. There's a BIMLink tool that can run through it. Don't forget, just as a simple thing, if you believe that any DWG data in your Revit projects is a bad and evil thing, it's a quick check. Just hit the button every once in a while and see, did somebody sneak something in? Check for your DWG files. There's also other tools. There's the BIM interoperability tools for Revit. You might have seen that when I was showing all of the add-ins that I had on my session of Revit. It might have been 2021 at the time. But my copy of Revit, the BIM interoperability tools, has some standards checking where you can build in some checks. You can use some defaults that are in there too, but you can build out some different checks and run them against your different Revit files. And let that be a system that comes back and tells you what's going on and where things might be in a good, danger, bad territory. A little bit more effort the more you get into things that are on that interoperability tool, which is a free add-in. It takes a little bit more human effort to get things done. The tools that invest a little bit of money in just free up your time to do something else and let these other tools take that and run. The Clarity tool can even run those BIM interoperability tool checks unattended on a scheduled basis for you. So there's nice interaction that can happen with all these different types of things. So pay attention to that model health. Saving somebody, making enhancements to your Revit project to save 5 minutes a day per person. It's, again, one of those micro things that adds up. You got 5 minutes a day per person. Let's say you've got 12 people in your company that are Revit users. Suddenly that 5 minutes a day turns into 1 hour a day. And that just starts escalating on up from there. And you get some pretty big returns. It might not be something that you see immediately. You can say, wow, I saved $50,000 on this one mouse click. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the little incremental changes. That 5 minutes turns into 10 minutes saved. That 10 minutes turns into 12. That 12 minutes turns into 15. And you start building up and incrementing these things, stack them on top of each other. And so this is using your model healthy, keeping your model healthy. But then the next piece is also do it different from CAD.
I think this is this is something that I see all the time. And when I say that, it is kind of that last jump before people truly start utilizing Revit 100% on all projects. Because the value that you get from using Revit as Revit and not as CAD, it starts with those incremental steps. So for example, because many of our products continue to be those construction documents, many times I hear, well, I don't really have to draw that in 3D. It's not going to be valuable for me to draw it in 3D. But there's so much that comes out of not drawing it in 3D. One of the benefits of moving from an AutoCAD to Revit environment is the parametric change management. And if you continue working as a drafter, simply drafting lines, you don't get that value that you see downstream when you're working within that 3D environment. It also builds on all of the information that's embedded in these tools that we'll talk about in just a minute. The second piece of this is really about content, your family, your block. In a traditional environment, often you're pulling blocks in from old projects. And often that's what we see when you start working with Revit. Well, I have these Revit families and these other projects. The challenge is version control is very important within the Revit environment. There's many issues with this, but one is version control. You don't know what you're pulling in, how you're pulling it in. Every 3 years, Autodesk improves that back door of the Revit platform. So things get added, information gets added, things change, calculations are going to change. And so not having the correct version of families. Also, you are bloating your server if you have the same family in 7 different versions only because you had them in so many different projects and that's where they stayed. So a lot of people question, well, do I need a larger server? Well, no, you don't really. You just need to manage the content that you have. So a lot of challenges that people have with their content is utilizing inaccurate or low quality content or content from different projects, which is then break down the uniformity and the need to streamline standards across the entire firm. That brings us to our third point of details. Details also often get shifted as, well, this is drafting, so we're just going to keep everything in CAD. But the organization of details within a Revit library file versus having them just in AutoCAD, the intelligence of detail components, the intelligence of the information that you're pointing at that's actually going to automate the addition of context for annotation. All of that is missing when you're bringing it in from Revit. Things like dimensions, all of that is missing. And so it takes more time not only to bring it in and modify it, the quality of your documentation is reduced because it's different than what your Revit files and projects actually look like. Changes moving forward are not going to be parametric, and so many other things. My mind just went blank, but I could keep going on and on. Line weights, I hear such challenges. So streamlining the use of your detail library also keeps that consistency and high quality across the firm, which I know so many find part of what the credibility of their firm is. And then the last one that I'd want to talk about really is utilizing the data. This probably has the highest impact of making a small change. Many schedules that can be starting to be implemented can be small. Plumbing fixture schedules, light fixture schedules, room finish schedules to a degree, because some can be very complicated. I'm not talking about, hey, let's start with air handling unit schedules. I'm talking about door schedules and window schedules. That data, that information that's being embedded, and it all trickles down, right? Because if you're organizing your families properly, if you have the right shared parameter files in your families, that'll trickle down to a population of the schedules when they're actually dropped in. But again, these truly are incremental changes. Add one schedule, optimize one family. Those type of things, as you do slowly, because we all know Revit is not a switch. Revit is a transition, and it takes time to move everything over. But if you continue that momentum over the course of 6 months, over the course of a year, you'll start to see that high impact from, kind of similar to that picture that Joe put up. Those small incremental changes, suddenly you'll see the higher value and big changes that are actually happening.
Yeah, I'll throw in an extra little teaser for that one of keep the idea of data front and center for a little bit when I finish interrupting Adriana and she gets onto her next piece, because data is critical to so many different things and places. And if you're not leveraging it from your BIM environment, then there's a big opportunity that you're missing out on. but we'll come back to that. So just call that a bit of a teaser. Um, from there, though, I'm gonna guess I'll harp on this one a little bit, and it's not specifically BIM, Revit, Autodesk software training, something along those lines. But I would say when we're looking at things from an incremental improvement standpoint, I'm really referring to any type of learning that's out there. Now, granted, from the Imaginate side, we've got an e-learning platform, a learning management system, Productivity Now, leverages and works with Eagle Point and all sorts of other things, where it's great and easy place where you can watch a 5-minute video that you know is going to be high quality and not a who knows quite what you might have received when you did a YouTube search. Some really great stuff there that can be small, technical, incremental learning. But I've also used that platform that we have for other types of business learning related to learning other pieces of non-Autodesk software, of getting an understanding of different types of business concepts that are out there. The link down here, I've stumbled across that one. It probably was somewhere around in 2017 of a dozen different places. It's actually a dozen different places, I think, that the person had curated a list of all the different types of stuff we can learn online for free. So whether we're talking about going to Autodesk University, which was funny, I wanted to grab their logo and drop it in here for AU. When I went to the AU site to build up this part of the slide deck, they already had the countdown for next year coming around. Well, you've got the recordings for past Autodesk universities that have a wealth of information. Some of it might be a little bit outdated depending on how far back you're going, but generally not. There's a lot of good data there. Autodesk University, something from Imaginate, just learning in general, getting an understanding. I never thought that I would be using Excel as much as I do in my professional life as I do now. It's just crazy. Taking a little bit of time and watching somebody's preview of what's Windows 11 going to be really like? Is it something more than just a new skin on top of your existing Windows, or is there something more fundamentally changed about it? Just little bits and pieces and nuggets of knowledge just about whatever. I find myself learning and just grabbing little bits of pieces here and there of things that are more people related. And the role that I'm in right now, there's so much more of just working with and interacting and managing people that is prevalent in my business life today. So learning about things that are on psychology and just general human tendencies is something that I spend some more significant amount of my time learning now than I ever thought I was going to do 20 years ago. But taking that and just constantly finding some little thing, just never finish a day without learning something you didn't know before. Maybe that's going a little bit overboard, but keep yourself open for that. Know that you don't know it all, and somebody out there has something that you can find valuable. Now, that being said, as with everything, consider your sources. You see somebody says, here's how a Revit file should be built, and this is the only way it should ever be built. Well, maybe not, whether we're talking families or projects or whatever. Here is the one and only way that you should do XYZ, run through options. Consider the source, find maybe the contrasting or competing opinions, and then weigh them against each other to figure out where it really is and where it really needs to be. But do it by constantly learning, not accepting things at face value, doing a little bit of deeper research behind it all, on no matter what it is. Just constant learning. Which then gets us to, if we've got learning, let's leverage it.
Yeah, this is something that I've started exploring, speaking of, hey, learn something new every day. Talking more and more with our clients has been so valuable for me to better understand different ways that they're leveraging the different tools that they have within their toolbox, one being Power BI. So Power BI will connect with different databases to allow you to track and analyze how things are being done, whether that's in Revit, whether that's through Clarity, whether that's in BIM 360. All of this work that you're doing on a regular basis, you can track to then target additional learning, changes that might need to be made, improvements based on these easily read dashboards, and really not that more difficult to create. Charts and graphs. It also allows you to be able to sort of push your agenda is the right phrase. But what does the CEO of a company really care about? If you can show them improvements that we can make in an incremental way, it's much easier for you to be able to make those improvements. And being able to see that in a graphical representation, in a decrease in time, and an increase in the number of win rates, accuracy in your deliverables, this is all very valuable to the executive management team from my perspective. And so being able to, from a BIM management position, track all of this information can help make those incremental changes to show that high impact. So bringing on tools that you still have at your disposal every day, this is part of your Microsoft tool set, to be able to track how Revit is being used, how Clarity is being used, well, which is really how Revit is being used, and being able to track that to show how these incremental changes are making a difference. Again, can be very, very impactful over the long term.
Cool. So there's a series of different things then, for just little incremental parts. Constant learning, one of the things you can learn could be Power BI or similar tools, Tableau, whatever. Taking time reviewing your families, reviewing your models, some free and some paid tools that can help out with that. So there was a total of 9 things that we had through here of items that you can look at to leverage for making success. If we wanted to throw a 10th out there of just any sort of thing that can go in to help you continually make improvement, I'd say, hey, leverage Imagine It. I've had this slide in many different presentations we've had for a long time now, but it really does help explain, my purpose to all this. The purpose of Imagine It, the purpose that I have the team that I do, is to do what we can to help you get into the best possible position for success. And that's going to be in whatever type of activity it might be, letting Imagine It be that extra tool in your toolbox for something small, for something big, for whatever it is, but to help become part of that bridge. And when we're in a spot these days where we're as strapped for time and just availability as much as we are, it can be a big piece to have us help that there. And we'll do it just by trying to partner as best we can to take a look at what's going on with your business strategies, what's going on in your CAD, your BIM world, those ideas like we have here for continuous improvement, to be able to work it through and understand what's the right solution for you. Because the solution that is something that will help you out might not be the same thing that will help out somebody else that's down the road. We've got some standardized practices that we go through to help identify what those things are and how we'll go about it. But we need to make sure that it's tailored to you based off of your needs, not a boilerplate. We're just going to slap this solution. You need a standard, great, use this one. Well, that might not work. Maybe there are some places where you've got a legitimate need for CAD information inside your files. Maybe you don't. Let's talk it about a little bit and see where we might be able to, Adriana, take this one over for BIM management assistance if that's what you need.
So this is part of our methodology, the Imagine It, Take Aim. This is how we like to help our clients with their services, and I think it's a really great approach. The first is really to define, and again, my first slide was all about making a plan. And you can do that internally, or you can have Imagine It help you. Establish your project implementation goals, assess your current environment, select a core development team, and then perform some mapping, whether that be integration mapping or process mapping, just any type of mind mapping. Let's get creative. how are things being done today, and really developing a project plan of here's where we are, here's where we want to be. So put together a plan of us how to get there. And the reality is that plan is live. It changes all the time. But you need to have a single foundation to begin with. From there, you start developing all of the tools that you need, whether it be standards documents that you can add to Productivity Now, or best practices for any type of education and training, the way that things need to be done. The development of the different libraries we talked about, whether it's still through Windows Explorer or programs like Avail or Unify, and have those libraries for content to be accessible and easy to find by your team members. And then start migrating that information and that data to really make it holistic for the whole project team, whether you're working more on the production side of things or higher level as an architect or as an engineer or project management. From there, let's have a controlled environment where you actually bring this out, whether it be a single project, a single team, a single department, a single division. Start with that controlled environment. Make your challenge, make your mistakes in a smaller environment so that you can make the appropriate changes and improvements so that you can actually expand that out to the remainder of the production team. Next. So really to define, we're defining the as-is state, not only for you guys, but some of the most valuable information is how others within your industry are doing this as well. We have the ability to take our experience from California to New York, down to Texas, and up into Canada, and the best practices across the entire North American team. And so, and it's different in every region of how people do things, and there's always reasons why. But we want to then be able to develop the ideal roadmap. This is what the perfect scenario really looks like. And so it allows you then to make the determination of how much you can handle doing internally. Let's take a look at this over 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year. Make those changes internally incrementally as you can, since so many companies continue to have their BIM managers working on billable projects. There's things that you're going to be taken away from, but you won't want to lose that momentum of moving forward. And understanding really how to navigate through that chaos of the technology. There's so much out there. Let's get rid of the noise and really focus on the low-hanging fruit and the priority to make these incremental changes to improve overall in the long run and make a high impact, really mitigating the risk of implementing this technology. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, and so with that, I'm going to say thanks everybody for taking time out of your day